Hey everybody, my name is Eric C, and I'm the illustrator for the game Drunken Goats. This is sort of a behind-the-scenes look at kind of the evolution of how the design of the cards came to be. If you watched our earlier intro video, you may have know that my friend Daniel is kind of he's the creator of the game. He came up with the gameplay and the rules and the concept for it all, and he called me to illustrate it. We went to college together, and we lived down the hall from each other, and I've worked on a few projects with him before, but this is definitely kind of the largest and most ambitious so far. A lot of the other ones have just been kind of one-off designs and everything like that. But when he called me, I was actually on my I was riding my bicycle across the country for a few months on doing a kind of a documentary drawing project, and spending a lot of time outdoors and interviewing people along the way. And it's the second large bike trip of its kind, but for me, but I ended up injuring my knees a little bit, so I had to stop and do some physical therapy, and that actually freed up a lot of time for me to develop the game a little bit more with Daniel. But the basic premise is that you're trying to collect pairs of each kind of alcohol card, and the alcohol cards actually haven't changed too much in the basic design. The time lapse you're seeing is actually the drawing app Procreate makes a time lapse of all the sketching that you do on it, so it comes in really handy when you're making a video for Kickstarter or whatever. But those have had some colors and textures added to them, but the goats were actually kind of a hard thing for me to wrap my brain around, how to draw them so they're interesting and so I could like them. So I started just doing some drawings of goats, trying to understand how they're shaped and what makes a goat look like a goat. They have horns and these kind of wide set eyes and hooves and things like that, and they're pretty ugly, which is I kind of like that about them. So I kind of used just basically a that as a base for how to draw them. And I don't know, I was working with the images. I was kind of having some trouble because they just didn't feel right. They didn't seem to have the essence of the game or the energy of the game. And Daniel kind of agreed, and we actually ran across a webcomic that was drawing goats very similarly. And I mean, it worked great for the webcomic, but it was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back to get me to kind of think about how are these things supposed to look? Should they be these black and white line drawings, or should the goats even be on the cards at all, or what needs to happen? And so I started to try to think of what are the goats conceptually. And the goats are actually the people playing the game. They're mischievous, and they're ugly, and they're getting into trouble, and they don't need to look like goats, except maybe throw some horns on them, or give them a t-shirt that says that they're a goat. So I kind of just started drawing these sort of bean-like biomorphic shapes, and putting them into situations, and they seem to make a lot more sense. I could still make them pretty ugly, but they seemed kind of adorable enough that they people would maybe want to relate to them, or maybe I wanted to feel like I could relate to them a little bit. And so the basic layout of a lot of the cards and the poses the goats are in are pretty similar to the original cards, but they they are it seems to work a lot better, seems to flow a lot better. And so this is kind of the next phase, is now that I kind of know how they want to look, is to kind of start to render them in a format that's flexible for, creating them in a print format. So these were done in Adobe Draw, which is a vector-based drawing app. And I'm going to switch over to Adobe Illustrator and kind of show you more about how they're colored and some design changes that happened after that. Okay, so I'm in Adobe Illustrator, which is kind of the best thing to be creating illustrations in. Go figure. If you're a designer, you know what a vector image is. If you're not, it sounds like a geometry term, and that's actually very accurate. What a vector image is that instead of being based on pixels like a lot of digital images, it's made up of shapes that are created with math. So it is a geometric thing. So that way you can blow this up and you'll never see any pixels. So it's really versatile, and you can recolor things very easily, and you don't have to worry about the degradation of JPEGs will if you keep saving them over time, start to lose quality. But a vector is all based on math, so it will stay safe. So when it's in vector format, you can use the Live Paint tool and start to color these things. And unfortunately for me, like sometimes I end up doing things the hard way, or I do a lot of web graphics, so I'm kind of used to the multitude of colors that you can achieve on a computer screen, even when you're in a CMYK color profile. So ink and paper, though, when you start to print these things out, it's not as forgiving. So one thing I did to kind of mitigate that is to get rid of some of the outlines. But as you can see, some of these colors, this is kind of one of the final, not the final version of the cards, but these colors are very close in value, so those things can get very muddy when you print those out. But I do like that, how much cleaner they are. And this is a custom typeface I made, which was just kind of a tall handwriting font, very kind of Tim Burton-esque. And the banners are just these geometric vectors with a kind of textured stroke applied to them. But another thing is that when you have a smaller font size for these, it becomes very hard to read, especially if you were to take this game to a bar or something like that where maybe the lighting isn't that great. So that was, this typeface also, it doesn't mesh that well with this kind of image because it is very, outline based, and this is just more geometric and shapes and colors. So that was something else I needed to work on, and in addition to upping the contrast and maybe adding some textures to these. So this is a near final version of one of the cards. There will probably be some subtle changes and things, and but I improved the font. This is a variation of Futura, which is on your computer. Probably I've eliminated a lot of outlines and added these kind of textured highlights and shadows to just give the image a little bit more fidelity. It's kind of funny how an image, like when I work on things, I don't know exactly what things are going to look like when I'm finished. I kind of like to just work a little more intuitively, and sometimes that means I'm going on a very long walk to maybe get not very far. But if you end up sticking with your original idea too often, you can kind of, when you finally get there, you can be a little disappointed, as opposed to responding to feedback and physical limitations and things. So So here's a PDF proof of some of the cards. Those red lines are actually just some guidelines for chopping them. They'll all just have a small white border around them. I'll probably make some subtle changes, and you can see you know, kind of clearer versions of these up on our Facebook page or Kickstarter page or website, and I'll put the link at the end of this video. So thanks again for watching. Hopefully that wasn't too long and boring. Anyways, find us on Facebook at Drunken Goats Game, and or our website drunkengoatsgame.com. If you're interested in supporting our first edition, check us out on Kickstarter. For 20 bucks, we'll send you the first edition of the game. We also have some pretty sweet rewards for people who donate more. We've got some t-shirts, some bottle openers, some Drunken Goats art, various things. So check it out, and thanks again.